Today I want to show you how to make this painting with simple circles that's easy to follow along. And to make it even easier, I've made a handout for you that includes the drawing that I will transfer and show you how to do the transfer. The handout also includes the bump pattern, which I'll use in my next video, but I wanted to go ahead and give it to you now. And it also includes the colors that I use. So you can use any colors that you have on hand. They'll work great. I only used 3 colors for this, but I also wanted to provide you with the list of colors in my palette. You can find the link in the description below. All right, let's get started. I've got a 4x6 piece of watercolor paper taped down to a little piece of plastic, and I'm going to transfer some circles on it. So what I'm going to do is hold it up to the light a little bit and center it. I could also cut this out to help center it better. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I've got some graphite paper that I've cut down, and you just want to make sure it's not waxy, that it's truly graphite. I'm going to slide that under, graphite side down, and I'm going to trace over my circles with this little stylus. It just has a little ball on the end. You could also do this with a pencil or a pen or anything that would give it a little pressure. This just gives you a nice smooth experience as you trace around your circles. So I can check after I've done one back here, and I want to see how dark it is. I don't need to overdo it. I just need it to be just dark enough to see what I have here. I'm really just going to give it a nice light pressure and check it occasionally to make sure it's still working. I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and I won't make you watch. I will see you when I'm done. I finished transferring by going over with the stylus. If you don't want to transfer it using one of my designs, you're perfectly welcome to just draw your own. Here's a little trick so that your lines don't show up later. I'm taking a kneaded eraser, and I'm going to just roll it back and forth. And the rolling action is gentler on the paper, so I don't disturb the surface of the paper. If you've done watercolors before, you've probably had that experience where you hit a spot that you've erased and it all of a sudden soaks way in and gets fuzzy and dark. So this just keeps that from happening, or at least makes it less likely, because it's a lot gentler. It's just picking up that graphite instead of removing everything else with it. And the reason I'm doing this is so that I can still see the circles, but when I'm finished, if I have a really light area, I don't want to see that graphite. I will go over this when I'm done again, and I can still get some of it up, but it's not as easy to get up. Once there's watercolor over it, it kind of holds it down. The next thing I'm going to do is pick out my colors. I've done a lot of color experiments to come up with this palette that includes a lot of colors that work well together. For this particular mixture, I wanted some good darks to contrast with some lights. And we're going to work with some of the darker colors, but then use them very lightly in some other areas. So the imidazolone brown, quinacridone magenta, and Payne's gray. I don't always work with just 3 colors, but I think it's a really good challenge to do that. It shows you that you don't have to have a big selection of paint, and it also has the result of giving you a finished painting where the colors are all working together really well. And the reason they work together so well is that each mixture will have a little bit of the other 2 colors in it. And that's just a little trick to getting your colors to look harmonious. So even though I might do 99% Payne's gray somewhere, I might still just have a little dab of the other two in it. And as I work, that's just going to naturally happen as you go around. So now I can do some things that are mostly magenta, mostly brown, mostly gray, or I can mix two at a time, or I can mix all three at a time. So I get a pretty good variety of colors just from these three. So let's get started. So even though I might do 99% Payne's Gray somewhere, I might still just have a little dab of the other two in it. And as I work, that's just going to naturally happen as you go around. So now I can do some things that are mostly magenta, mostly brown, mostly gray, or I can mix two at a time, or I can mix all three at a time. So I get a pretty good variety of colors just from these three. So let's get started. I'm going to start out with a pretty dark color, and I like making my darks in some of the smaller areas and then using the water to get that darker paint to travel out into a lighter, larger area. They do not need to look perfect. So I like to just work with smooth edges as much as I can and then not worry about it being a perfect circle. All right, so I'm gonna do one that's mostly brown and maybe do right here. So I'm planning ahead already that maybe in between the two, I would put some water and let them mix together. And I'm letting that sit for just a sec. Since I have watercolor paper, I can do that. If you have paper that's not watercolor paper, it might dry too fast. You might have to work a little quicker. So that's one of the advantages of using watercolor paper, is it gives you just a little bit more of a dry time to work with. All right, so those are my three colors. So now I'm gonna work with some lighter versions of those colors. I'm just barely gonna touch it and see what happens. Maybe move the wet area there. So two possibilities, maybe this is gonna run this way or this will run this way. Let's just find out. So maybe over here, let's go with this kind of a wet mixture. And I see that my Payne's Gray is starting to dry. So now I need to really jump into action here and make sure that I get that edge before it's completely dry. There we go. We'll let that run in a little bit. I'm gonna try, let's turn it, I'm gonna try just plain water here. Just gonna do plain water in a few areas. Gives you a very subtle, understated area. And I think that really brings things to life as it contrasts with these darker areas. Okay, so I've got two ready to go here. And I'm gonna put my paper where it's comfortable for me to do this edge. All right, get plenty of water. Bring it around, and then I'm gonna turn it around so I can get this edge. I like working with the natural curve of my wrist so that I can just curve it along here. And I'm going to do the same thing over here while I'm at it. And over here. You can see things are working pretty slowly compared to some of the other paintings I've done that have been a little wetter. But have some patience. You can see the water moving in and you can see the paint moving in. So you got both things happening. I love that. And maybe do one more water over here. have a little bit of strategy involved. Don't want to go much further out than this before I get this corner, before things dry. So I might want to quickly get a few things done here so I have some wet things waiting for me once I get down this far. If things dry before you get to them, that's okay. Not everything has to react with something else. Some things can be a little more active than others. All right, and then I can always drop a little water in to keep things from drying out too much and just making sure that the edges stay wet. All right, so I'm also looking at moving colors around, so maybe I'll come back with a magenta over here. Doing the middle first, and then the edges. Nice thing about working with your colors this way is, like I just did, I didn't even wash my brush. I just grabbed some water, and that's okay because I wanted that color up there. You can always drop paint into something, especially something that's lighter and you want to make darker. Or this one, I'm just going to extend it a little bit with some paint. If it's starting to get pretty dry and you drop paint in, you might get something that's a little more undesirable, like it just sits there and does nothing. But as long as you've got it a little bit wet still, you have an opportunity to drop some paint in. The nice thing about working off of a palette, a couple advantages, rather than just working from the paint. As you saw, I could have things pre-mixed a little bit. It's also going to keep me from accidentally getting too much on my brush because I can see the kind of mixture I have. And it keeps me from having like a little chunk of paint because I can make sure everything's nice and smooth. And it just saves time. It's there ready to go. And I'm not constantly getting my brush over here and then washing it. So it saves you from washing as much stuff out as well. Especially when you're working with something where timing is important. You want to be able to work quickly when you want to. Now that doesn't mean you couldn't reach over and get some really strong paint from the palette. You could do that when you want. I'm just kind of letting these two colors mix in the circle. just some water. And let's see if I can expand that circle of water a little bit. And this is pretty dry. I'm not sure anything's going to happen, but there's a possibility if I get enough water here that it will push the paint away like it's doing over there. This one got a little big into the other circles. I'm just going to make this circle smaller. So this would be somewhere I might erase this line that's not being used, but it's really not too dark. I'll pull this one around, round it out just a little bit. All right, my last shade.